There are a handful of things I say to almost every author I work with. Things that come up again and again, regardless of where she is in her journey, regardless of how many books she's published or hasn't published yet. And I've been thinking lately that these things deserve a wider audience because the women in my mentorship hear them. But there are a lot of women out there still trying to figure this out on their own, still making decisions in the dark, still waiting for some external signal that it's okay to take their writing seriously. So today's episode is for you. It's the advice I give my students, the stuff I come back to in almost every conversation, the investments and the mindset shifts that I've watched change the trajectory of careers again and again. Some of it is practical, some of it is going to feel more like a mindset conversation. All of it is honest. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Write Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, best-selling romance author, book coach, and founder of Serenade Publishing. I've been an avid reader ever since I could hold a book, and I've spent a decade immersed in the world of writing, editing, and publishing fiction. I know firsthand what it takes to turn a love of storytelling into a sustainable, soul-aligned author career. Each week, I share real talk about writing fiction, marketing smarter, and staying inspired, along with up-to-date industry insights and the strategies that are working right now. You'll also hear from fellow authors, editors, and industry experts who are out there doing the work and making waves. Here, we put the woo in the work of writing, publishing, and growing your author business. Think of this as your creative business pep talk, packed with heart, hustle, and a little bit of magic. So get cozy and join me. Your writing journey starts now. When a new client comes to me, one of the first things I do is listen to how she talks about investing in herself. Not just financially, though that's part of it. I mean more broadly. Does she treat her writing career like something that deserves real resources? Time, money, energy, attention? Or does she treat it like something she'll get serious about once she's earned the right? Because here's what I've noticed. The writers who are stuck are almost always stuck in a holding pattern of their own making. They're waiting for the manuscript to be finished, for the savings account to look a certain way, for life to get a little quieter, for something outside themselves to say, now you're allowed. And I understand that deeply. I've been there. But what I know from years of working with authors is that the waiting doesn't protect you, it just delays you. The 4 investments I'm going to talk about today are the ones I come back to most often in my mentorship. They're the ones that, when a client finally commits to them, I watch everything start to shift. So let's go through them now. The first thing I talk about with almost every author I work with is money mindset. And before anyone switches off, stay with me for a minute because this is not abstract. Here is what I see constantly. A woman who is talented, who is serious, who has a genuine vision for her author career, but who is running a very old story about money in the background. A story that says spending money on yourself is indulgent, that responsible people wait for proof before they invest, that you earn the right to be supported by first doing it alone. That story is costing her, not just financially, it's costing her time, direction, momentum, and the kind of clarity that only comes when you stop trying to figure everything out by yourself. What I tell my students is this: investment is not a reward for success. It is often the mechanism of it. The authors who build real, sustainable careers don't wait until everything is already working before they put resources in it. They decide what they're building and they fund it with intention. They treat their creative career the way any business owner would treat a business they believed in. And alongside that, I talk about manifesting, not in a passive vision board and wait kind of way, but in a practical, identity based way. What I encourage my students to do is write about their author life in present tense, as if it's already happening. Every morning, describing the books that are out in the world, the readers they're connecting with, the career they're actively building, in as much detail as they can access. What this does, and I've watched it happen over and over, is close the gap between who they are right now and who they're becoming. It trains your nervous system to believe that what you're building is real and possible. And once your nervous system believes it, your decisions start to reflect it. The principle I come back to is this: belief becomes the proof. You don't wait for evidence that it's going to work out and then commit. You commit, and the evidence begins to arrive. That's not magical thinking. That is how every serious creative career I've ever watched get built has actually worked. The second thing I want to tell you is this: get a coach, and get one sooner than feels comfortable. I'm not saying this because I am a coach, though I understand that's how it might land. I'm saying it because of what I've watched happen to writers who finally have a thinking partner in their corner, versus writers who are still trying to piece things together from blog posts and Facebook groups and borrowed advice from other people who are also figuring it out. The difference is not subtle. What a good mentor gives you is not just information, it's perspective. It's the ability to look at your specific situation, your books, your goals, your timeline, your strengths, and give you a direction that is actually calibrated to you, not to what worked for somebody else, not generic advice dressed up as a strategy, yours. The women who come to me and make the most significant progress are not always the ones with the most books published or the most experience. They're the ones who are genuinely coachable, who come in ready to make decisions, not just gather more information. And very often they come having already invested in mentorship before, which means they already understand the value of that kind of support. I had a client recently, and I'll keep the details vague to protect her privacy, but she had been circling the same publishing decision for almost a year. She'd asked everyone she knew. She'd done all the research. She still couldn't move. We resolved it in one session, not because I'm magic, but because she needed someone who could look at the full picture with her and help her see what she was actually choosing between. That's what coaching does. It collapses the timeline on clarity. Now, the objection I hear most often is, I can't afford it. And I want to sit with that honestly for a moment because I take it seriously. I know that coaching at this level is an investment, but here's the question I always ask back. What is the cost of not having it? The publishing decisions made without the right information, the months spent going in circles, the launches that underperform because the strategy wasn't there, the creative energy that goes into self-doubt instead of building. Those things have a price too. They're just harder to see on a spreadsheet. The right coaching investment returns on itself, and the clarity it gives you, you carry it forward. You don't have to buy it back every time you face a new decision. So my advice, find the mentor who is genuinely a few steps ahead of where you want to be. Someone whose career you respect, someone you trust. Have the conversation. Stop waiting until you feel ready, because readiness is built by doing, not by waiting. The third investment I talk about constantly, and the one I think is most consistently underestimated, is the retreat. Not a webinar, not an online summit, though those have their place. I mean the in-person, sleeping somewhere beautiful, fully present, out of your ordinary life experience. The kind of gathering where you're in a room with serious, creative women for several days, and something in you genuinely shifts. I host retreats, and they're profound experiences. And what I watch happen to the women who come every single time follows a pattern. They arrive a little guarded, still carrying the noise of their regular lives, still in the mental mode of, I'll just slot this in alongside everything else. And by the second time that's gone, something has opened. They're thinking bigger. They're talking about their work with a confidence they didn't have when they walked in. They're making decisions they'd been sitting on for months. Part of this is the facilitation. Part of it is simply being removed from the environment that keeps you small. But a huge part of it is the other women in the room. The connections made at retreats are not like the connections you make online. They go deeper and faster. You're sharing meals, sharing writing time, having the honest conversations that don't happen in a comment section. The women sitting next to you at a dinner might become your most trusted accountability partner. The conversation on the last evening might be the one that finally helps you articulate what you're building. I have watched collaborations start at retreats that have genuinely changed the shape of people's careers. I've watched women leave with this level of clarity about their work that months of solo effort hadn't given them. And I have watched the confidence that comes from being in a room full of people who take this as seriously as you do, spill back into everything they do when they get home. Your environment is always communicating something to your nervous system. When you put yourself in a room full of women who are investing in their work, who speak about their writing with conviction, who are building real things, you start to carry that frequency back into your daily life. So what I tell my students is this: put the retreat on the calendar before you feel financially ready. Save for it specifically. Treat it as a non-negotiable line item, not a luxury you'll get to eventually. Because not one woman has ever left one of these experiences and told me she wished she hadn't come. The fourth investment, and this one ties closely to retreats, is showing up at industry events, conferences and festivals, the rooms where your field actually gathers. I host the Sunshine Coast Fiction Festival, and one of the things I see year after year is the authors who keep coming back, the ones who make it a fixture in their calendar. And what I've noticed is that it's not just the sessions that bring them back, though the sessions matter. It's the calibration. Being in that room once a year recalibrates something in them that ordinary life slowly erodes. Here's what industry events give you that nothing else does. They give you real-time intelligence about the publishing landscape. The industry moves fast. What's true about distribution, about reader behavior, about platform algorithms, about which genres are growing and which are contracting, this changes constantly. The conversations you have in a conference hallway are more current and more specific than anything you'll read in an article. The offhand comment from someone who's just come out of a meeting with a major publisher. The indie author who's just cracked a strategy that nobody's talking about yet. That kind of information circulates in rooms. You have to be in the room to get it. They give you a sense of proportion. When you're working alone, it is very easy to lose perspective, to feel like what you're building is fragile and uncertain, and maybe a little unlikely. Walking into a room of hundreds of authors who are already doing this, all taking it seriously, all building something real, to something to that feeling immediately. It reminds you that this is a real industry and you belong in it. And they give you relationships, the kind that develop over years and become genuinely foundational to your career. I have made connections at industry events that changed the direction of what I've built. Introductions that lead to things I could not have predicted. Friendships that have become part of my professional community in ways that still surprise me. What I tell my students is, stop seeing the conference ticket as a cost and start seeing it as access. because that's precisely what it is. Access to information, to people, to relationships, and to a version of yourself that has been reminded she belongs in these rooms. And go with an intention. Know what you're there for. Know what questions you're sitting with. Know what kind of conversation would make the whole trip worth it. That intention shapes what you find. Money mindset, manifesting, coaching, retreats, and conferences. If I had to name the single thread running through it all is this: identity. Every one of those investments works because of how it changes the way you see yourself. The author you become when you have a mentor who believes in your potential. The author you become when you've sat in a room full of serious women who are building real things. The author you become when you stop waiting for external permission and start operating from a deeper belief in your own work. This is the thing I come back to again and again in my mentorship. You don't wait to feel like an author CEO and then act like one. You act like one and the identity follows. The investments, the rooms, the practice, they're all in service of that becoming. They're how you close the gap between who you are and who you actually are building toward being. That's the through line. And once you understand it, the investments start to feel less like costs and more like steps. If today's episode has resonated with you, I want to tell you about the most intimate way I work with authors right now. It's called the Author CEO Private Mentorship. It's a 4-month one-on-one experience where we design your author business from the ground up. We work through your identity and vision, your publishing strategy, your business model, and your execution roadmap. You leave with a clear 12-month plan, a completely different relationship with your author career, and the kind of clarity that means you're never making decisions in the dark again. This is the container where all the things I've talked about today get put into practice. The mindset work, the strategic thinking, the kind of support that actually changes the trajectory. It's offered by application only because I work with a small number of women at a time, and I want to make sure every person I say yes to is someone I can genuinely serve. If something in today's episode make you think this is the year I stop waiting, I would love to hear from you. The details and the application are at serenadepublishing.com/the-author-CEO. I'll link it in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again next week on the Right Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to the Right Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world if you'd leave a review and share the show with your writer friends. It helps more creatives find their way to us. And don't forget to follow Serenade Publishing on Instagram and TikTok for more writing tips, publishing advice, and exciting events to keep you inspired. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and know that I'm here to support you every word of the way.